In a series as big as Resident Evil, there's bound to be some characters who only make one or two appearances, but among these characters is one that particularly stands out for being one of the most important characters to the Resident Evil timeline. So sit back and get comfortable as we delve into the extremely traumatic backstory of Rosemary Winters. Rose was born on August 2nd, 2020 as the daughter to Ethan and Mia Winters shortly after they have been moved to Eastern Europe by Chris Redfield. And after Rose was born, they were also moved multiple other times before finally settling down in another house in the mountain regions of Eastern Europe. Due to Ethan and Mia's past afflictions with the mold, the family was constantly under watch by the BSAA, who tried to keep Rose's existence a secret from nearly everybody. But even with all these restrictions that have been put on them, the family still managed to live a normal and happy lifestyle. And when Rose would turn 6 months old, Ethan and Mia would throw her a half birthday party where they would get her all kinds of toys and presents. But it was shortly after this event where Rose's existence would get leaked out either by the BSAA or the Connections. And somehow this information found its way to the leader of the neo-pagan cult in the isolated mountain village, Mother Miranda. With this information, Miranda would abduct Mia Winters and shapeshift into her before taking her place in the Winters family household. She would stay in Mia's place for just little less than a week until the night of February 8th, 2021, where Miranda disguised as Mia would read Rose a bedtime story before sending Ethan to go put her to bed. After this, Ethan and Miranda disguised as Mia would sit down to have dinner together, before Chris and his Hound Wolf squad would gun down Miranda, taking her as well as Rose and Ethan, the latter of whom they had knocked unconscious. Rose and Miranda were transported in the same truck, with the Hound Wolf squad believing Miranda to be dead even though she was just faking. This gave her an opportunity to abduct Rose and then head back to the village, where she would crystallize Rose and chop her up into different pieces before storing the pieces in different flasks. She would give each of the 4 lords one flask before telling them to guard the flasks with their lives. Soon after, Ethan would arrive at Castle Dimitrescu before being met by Heisenberg and knocked unconscious before being taken to the meeting with the 4 lords and Miranda. Here they discuss who gets to be the one to kill Ethan, and though Carl and Lady D argue for a little bit, Miranda ultimately decides that Ethan's fate is in Heisenberg's hands. After Ethan escapes Heisenberg's games, he makes his way back to Castle Dimitrescu and this time enters the castle with no interruptions. From here, Ethan would go through unimaginable horrors in the castle, eventually taking on the 3 daughters, Bella, Danielle, and Cassandra, and even Lady Dimitrescu herself. After defeating Lady Dimitrescu, Ethan would walk over to a nearby stand which held a flask on it. Ethan would take the flask and bring it to the Duke to sell, only to find out that this flask contained the crystallized head of his daughter Rose, whom he had been looking for the entire time. And then the Duke gives Ethan the good news and tells him his daughter's indeed still alive, and then he directs Ethan towards a house with a red chimney where he could learn more about the situation. Once Ethan makes it to the house with the red chimney, he reads a note that tells him all about Rose being crystallized and put into the different flasks. The note also tells him that if all 4 flasks are obtained and put into the altar, Rose will be fully restored into perfect condition. Once Ethan reads this, he immediately sets out on a journey to find all 4 flasks and put them in the altar. Once he succeeds in doing so, he accidentally leaves the altar alone for a little bit too long, allowing Miranda to get a hold of it. Using the altar, Miranda begins the ceremony to resurrect her daughter Eva. And just as Miranda thinks she finally has her daughter back after all of these long years, she looks over and realizes it's still just Rose. And by using her powers, Rose drains Miranda's energy immensely. This extremely weakens Miranda's healing factor, allowing for her to be harmed by bullets. This is where Ethan comes in, and him and Miranda fight to the death, with him ultimately emerging victorious. And though Ethan won the battle, the injuries that had been inflicted on him over time were still killing him, and once he got Rose to safety, he made the ultimate sacrifice to save his family, blowing himself up as well as the entire village and the Mega Mycete. Rose was carried to safety and brought back to her mother by Chris Redfield, who commanded the Hound Wolf squad to fly them up in the air just in time for them to get enough distance to not be affected by the explosion. Here Mia would ask where Ethan is, and Chris would tell her that he sacrificed himself so that they could all escape. After the incident with Miranda, when everybody learned about Rose's powers, she was placed in protective custody of the US government, and due to her powers being widely known by the public, she posed a serious and direct security risk to the United States, and can be deemed valuable to anybody looking to develop any bioweapons. Rose was raised by her mother Mia for a few years, and Chris and the Hound Wolf squad would regularly come to check up on them to make sure everything was alright. Rose was watched over so much by Chris and his squad, she actually saw them as somewhat of extended family members. Rose was still allowed to go to public school even with the faculty knowing about her powers, and Chris even met with the faculty to ensure them 100% that Rose was safe to be around other students who were attending the school. Rose's experience at the school was terrible for the most part. Due to her being a mutant, she was almost constantly bullied by other students, both physically and verbally. And on top of this, Rose's mutant nature would manifest an excretion of a white substance in her sweat whenever she got stressed, which, as you could guess, led to more bullying. The people who bullied Rose the most were 3 students named Lucy, Catherine, and Jimmy. These 3 would oftentimes bully Rose for no reason, even going so far as to pretend to be her friends just to lure her into their tricks. And even going into high school, Rose would still experience bullying from other students. And it didn't help that her own mother, Mia, was no longer involved in her life at this point, and Rose was instead placed in custody of US government agents as well as the Hound Wolf squad. This is when Rose would begin suffering with self-esteem issues. Growing extremely resentful towards her mutant nature, she would begin questioning who her dad even was, with the only thing she knew about him being that he died saving her life. So when Rose turned 16, Chris gave her Ethan's old jacket as a birthday present, but he still refused to tell her any more information about what Ethan went through to save her and Mia. And by the age of 16, Rose and her powers were becoming more and more useful to both the US government and the Hound Wolf squad, which were both interested in recruiting Rose to be part of their teams, though she declined Chris's offer due to the work that she witnessed him putting the Hound Wolf squad through. In year 2037, Rose had once more become the target of the Black God, which had survived the explosion in 2021 and was now living inside of the last sample of the Mega Mycete, which was being kept in a government laboratory in the US for research purposes. And sometime later that year, Miranda would take advantage of Rose wanting to get rid of her powers by giving her hallucinations to lure her into the conscience of the Mega Mycete. First, Rose would receive a call from her friend Kay telling her to meet him at the local park, and when she got there, he would inform her that there is indeed a way that she could get rid of her powers. And then he brings her to the laboratory where the Mega Mycete sample is stored and informs her that if she enters a consciousness of the Mega Mycete, she may be able to find the purifying crystal and remove her powers. Once she hears this, Rose asks how she could enter the conscience of the Mega Mycete, and he tells her to just reach out to it. This works, and once she enters, she awakens in a room that looks exactly like the one she was just in. But this time, when she goes to leave, she ends up in the basement dungeon of Castle de Mitresque. And after walking around for a little bit, Rose would hear a voice on the other side of a door, and once she entered the room which the voice was coming from, she would meet a girl who looks exactly like her. The two would find a way out of the dungeon, and on their way out, they would see a lot more of these people that look just like Rose, and they were all being attacked by these pale zombie-like monsters known as face eaters. And when the face eaters started approaching them, the two attempted to make an escape, but Rose was the only one who made it out. But not without the help of a spiritual being that created a path for Rose to take in order to escape the dungeon. After escaping, Rose asks who this being is and if he's some kind of guardian angel. He replies with a yes, and then Rose asks his name, saying that if he's some kind of angel, is his name Gabriel or Michael? He tells her his name is Michael, and then the two set out on their mission to find the purifying crystal, with Michael acting as a guide to Rose throughout the rest of her adventure. After making it to the main area of the castle, Rose runs into an evil version of the Duke who sends a group of face eaters after her, forcing her to run away. After she gets somewhere where she could catch her breath, Michael gives Rose a gun to defend herself against any threats. When Rose makes it back to the main area of the castle, the Duke is gone, but she does see a statue holding a cage with the purifying crystal inside of it. And sitting next to it is a piece of paper that says if 3 masks are obtained and put on the statues, the cage will be unlocked. So Rose set out to collect all 3 masks, which she did, and on her way she also picked up a couple of power amplifiers, which greatly increased the strength of Rose's superpowers, making it so she could destroy anything attached to a mold core, as well as greatly decreasing the speed of any enemies. But upon picking up the 3rd and final flask, Rose would feel a sharp pain in her arm, which would be just a distraction needed for one of the monsters she fought earlier to come up behind her and knock her unconscious. And when she regains consciousness, she finds herself in a room filled with a bunch of cores where she needs to figure out the difference between the real and fake ones in order to escape. And when she does, she goes back to the main area and puts the masks on the statues and finally obtains the purifying crystal just to find out it was a fake. The Duke tells Rose that he had used the fake crystal as bait to lure her into a trap. And next thing she knew, Rose was waking up in an enclosed space where she had to fight the monster that had knocked her unconscious in a one-on-one battle to the death. After emerging victorious, Rose gets surrounded in face eaters and is forced to jump into a nearby body of water. And when she does, she teleports to a snowy forest, and after walking around for a little bit, she finds House Beneviento and goes inside. And when she steps out of the elevator, she sees a bunch of giant monkey plushies as well as balloons arranged into the words "Welcome Rose." And after searching a little further into the estate, Rose finds a purifying crystal, and just as she goes to grab it, it gets taken away as well as all of her weapons and gear. And she's instead forced to solve puzzles using dolls over school bullies Lucy, Catherine, and Jimmy. And after doing so, Rose would get a phone call telling her to take the nearby elevator upstairs to get the purifying crystal. And when Rose finally managed to make it to the elevator and get to the upper level, she would see that it was full of giant dolls. These dolls would chase Rose down while making fun of her for her powers and telling her that it was all her dad's fault. This is when Rose would run into a room and Michael would seal the room shut. Then Michael and Rose would have a conversation, with Michael asking Rose if she resents her father and Rose saying no and that she just wishes he was still alive. Then Michael brings Rose to the house that Ethan, Mia, and Rose lived in when Rose was only 6 months old, and the house looked exactly like it did during Rose's half-birthday party. Rose was amazed that she finally got to see the house that she lived in when she was only 6 months old, and after searching around for a little bit, Rose would find a letter that was written to her by Ethan. The note tells Rose that Ethan loves her and he will always be there to protect her no matter what. And just as Rose finishes reading the letter, Evelyn appears behind her and teleports them both back to House Beneviento. Here, Evelyn informs Rose that she'll have to go a lot deeper into the consciousness of the Mycelium in order to find the purifying crystal, and then the two begin fighting. The battle goes on for quite some time, and just as Rose is about to get struck down by Evelyn, Ethan comes in and saves her and tells her to not give up and to go find the purifying crystal. And that would give Rose the motivation she needed to keep searching for the purifying crystal. And after a little bit of searching, Rose would find the thing that was creating the copies of her, and just beyond that point was the purifying crystal. And just as Rose picks it up and is about to remove her powers, Miranda comes in and tells her that she had fallen for her trap. Miranda had created an illusion of Rose's friend Kay, telling her to enter the consciousness of the Mycelium so that Miranda could use Rose as a vessel for her daughter Eva. And just as Miranda is about to attack Rose, Ethan comes in and saves her, and the two run to a more open area. Miranda would arrive shortly after Ethan and Rose, and she would begin fighting Ethan, and as the two were battling, Ethan would tell Rose to go and live a normal life just like she always wanted. But instead, Rose would shatter the purifying crystal and get her powers back, and then she would begin fighting Miranda. The fight would go on for quite a bit before Ethan would call Rose over and give her his mold power, which when fused with her own was enough to take down Miranda. And after winning the battle, Rose would rush over to Ethan and the two would have one last conversation. And just as Ethan died, Rose would be transported back to the normal world and Ethan's wedding ring would somehow appear in her hand. And from that day on, Rose would visit Ethan's grave every single week. And sometime later, she decided to join Chris's operation, which would have her taking lots of tests. And on Ethan's birthday, she would visit his grave, and after talking for a little bit, she would be called upon by one of Chris's soldiers. And when she was on her way to get in the car, one of the soldiers called her Evelyn, which would cause her to grab him and threaten to kill him. And they did have a sniper nearby, but the man told him to stand down. And when the two get in the car, the soldier tells Rose that she's a lot like Ethan, and then they drive off together. And that concludes Rose's story for now, but they could bring her back in a future Resident Evil game, which is very likely, but as of right now, that's about all we got for today, so see ya. Well, there you have it, guys. The full backstory of Rosemary Winters. If you guys want to see more videos like this, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I'll see you all on the next episode of Bagels Battles.